Welcome, everyone, and thanks for joining us on today's webinar, How to Stop Rubber Stamping User Access Reviews Within Regulated Applications, brought to you by the IT Forum. I'm Kelly Vick, the host of the program, and it's my pleasure to introduce our subject matter expert, Jason Kim, VP of Solutions Engineering and Advisor from Pathlock. Jason is a seasoned expert in identity security with over 20 years of experience. As the leader of Pathlock's global solution engineering and advisory team, he oversees solution design, pre-sales activities, and customer guidance on best practices and industry trends. Jason specializes in identity governance, strategy, and delivering scalable solutions that help organizations secure digital assets, ensure compliance, and empower users. As a passionate advocate for innovation and collaboration, Jason actively contributes to the cybersecurity community, sharing knowledgeable insights to address evolving challenges in the field. Before we begin, here's a short housekeeping video. We'll be right back after this.
The IT Forum, educational content for governance, risk management, and compliance professionals. A forum for thought leaders to address today's GRC and IT security topics.
Taking that threat intelligence and using that as an overlay in your existing systems becomes really important.
There is a big difference in service providers versus other third parties that you might be providing data to.
But it highlights organizations' lack of preparedness for situations like this.
Here are some housekeeping notes to be aware of. This webcast is interactive and we want your questions. Please submit these at any time using the Questions tab, and we'll address as many of these as possible during the webinar. We've also lined up some polls to get your input, and we'll notify you when these are active. Please be ready to submit your response when prompted by using the box below your console. Just make sure the slides are not in full screen mode, or you will not see the options. Make sure you check out our supporting resources in the Attachments tab, as we've uploaded some great content for you today. We want to hear from you, so don't forget to leave your feedback and comments. We take feedback seriously, and it helps us plan for future programs. This webinar is approved by NASBA. To qualify for CPE credit, you must demonstrate participation by attending the full session, responding to the polls, and by rating us at the end. Certificates will be issued within 7 days from our learning management system, the IT CPE Academy. So please watch out for the email notification and check your spam folder if that doesn't come through. After the live presentation, this webcast will be available on demand. So please share with any colleagues who you think will be interested in the topic. And now, let's get started.
Okay, so on today's program, we'll address how to improve the efficiency of UARs by focusing reviews on high-risk access. Close the gap between compliance and security with smarter, risk-informed decisions, and simplify the reviewer experience to reduce friction and avoid rubber stamping. Jason will run us through a slide presentation, and we'll pause throughout for our poll questions. We have 3 of those lined up for you today, before taking audience questions at the end. So now, without further ado, I will turn everything over to you, Jason.
Thank you, Kelly. Appreciate it very much, and thank you everyone for attending today's session. Greatly love sharing knowledge and collaborating. I really love the collaboration in person, but we'll settle for the one-way webinar today. I think we already went through who I am. I guess a little bit more context about who I am. I've been practicing identity security, directory, user authentication, authorizations, governance, primarily in the application access space for too long now. It's been 30 years. And I started off my career with Novell, for those who remember who Novell is, and have also joined other organizations like Savient and now with Pathlock, but also ran an IGA program and architected many different aspects of an IGA program, from automated provisioning to user access reviews and all things IGA. So really love this space, been doing it for a long time, and I do love sharing knowledge. So hopefully you get some value out of today's presentation. So without further ado, why do we perform user access reviews? I don't think it's people love doing them, so I don't think it's fun. But there's a reason why, and that's really around regulations. And there's a lot of different regulations, right? There's SOX that requires public companies in the United States to maintain internal controls. It's primarily the Section 404 that specifically addresses the need for management to address and assess and document those controls, right? But it's also PCI, it's HIPAA, NIST cybersecurity framework, ISO 27001, GDPR, FISMA, and if you're in Europe, it could be CRA, it could be NIST 2, it could be DORA, and other countries do have regulations around this as well. We're just looking at the main America's ones here. But it really does require these controls to be proven, provide evidence for internal audit, external audit purposes. And even if you're not bound to these regulations, some companies choose to follow this best practice of review and user access to ensure that workers, could be employees, non-employees, have the appropriate access and don't have toxic combinations of access. Specifically, we're going to talk about that specifically here. That could lead to internal fraud. No organization likes revenue leaking out of a company because people have toxic combinations that are doing internal threat. Forget about external threat actors that are compromising accounts and trying to get in the front door. What are employees doing with inappropriate access they may have, right? So it's a big reason. So if we look at this, today we're going to focus on a challenge that I think all of you have or have had at some point in time. It's how to manage the access risks and control access in your financially critical regulated applications. The solution is an enterprise access governance approach that includes unified user access certification reviews. And why are they so critical? It's not just for the compliance requirements like I talked about, but it's for strengthening your security and improving your operational efficiency. The current complex business application landscape makes it harder to manage access uniformly and to perform consistent and repeatable user access reviews. Your most financial ERP type systems have a security model that's very complex, making it more difficult to really understand who has access to what. Now, the practical strategies for a unified, streamlined user access review process that covers your regulated apps, because that's where a lot of the risk is, but also other apps that are deemed risky by your organization. So typically there's a program that will identify and prioritize the risk of your users inside those applications, and you want to focus on onboarding those applications into your program. Crawl, walk, run, don't try to boil the ocean, cliche. But you get the biggest value by reviewing your riskiest applications first in your program. So if we look at what's driving this, let's talk about user access reviews. It's one of those controls that's often seen as compliance checkbox activity. It is really a foundational control for both security and governance. It's about answering who has access to what and should they have that access. But I also want to bring to your attention, are they using the access they have? And we'll talk about that further in this webinar. Users only have an access to systems and data they need, and they should have nothing more. So the security principle of least privilege, right? And if you're going to have standing privileges, they should be the least privileged. And there's a whole zero trust model as well that get into that, where it's just in time and time bound. But for standing access, you want to be least privileged. So from a security standpoint, you want to have these user access reviews needed to find unused, excessive access that can become easy targets for insider threats or external attackers that want to compromise those accounts. You want to obtain visibility to those accounts that have the excessive or obsolete permissions before they become a threat to your business. And you want to reduce the insider risk and minimize accidental or intentional misuse. And then ITGC catch those orphaned accounts, which don't belong to any identity or unused services that could be exploited just because you don't know that they're there, right? And as we look further into this around the compliance aspect, it's right. Did it for we have compliance driving these user access reviews. There's all those acronyms and the regulations that we looked at, like SOX and NIST and GDPR, ISO standards. They all require these access reviews as a control to ensure sensitive data is only accessible to authorized individuals. So user access reviews are needed to build trust with your customers and partners, and you have to be serious about protecting that sensitive data. Part of all these frameworks, it's a concept of least privilege that we talk about, making sure the standing privileges only have the access they need to do their jobs and nothing more. And then the other part around this is the governance. So access reviews give both IT and business owners visibility and clarity into who has access to what and why. It enforces the accountability across the business. Reviews force the business to take a pause and take inventory to really look at the users, their roles, and whether their access still makes sense in the current environment. And it helps ensure that the access actually aligns with your policies. So if you look at the landscape, we talked about user access reviews in a general sense. Most organizations, their user access reviews are happening. It might be manual, it might not be automated. Mostly in the regulated application landscape, it makes sense that these ERP applications, they're high risk, business critical, financial controls in there, deeply integrated into finance and operations. It's a core system auditors will always look at. And that includes some of the common ERP applications like SAP, Workday, Oracle. And Oracle has a lot of different JDE, NetSuite, Oracle Cloud, Oracle EBS, PeopleSoft. SAP has a variety of different applications, whether it's the SAP ECC on-prem, S4 HANA, Ariba Concur, SuccessFactors. And then you have things like Salesforce. And then I would say your IT applications like Active Directory, which might be a control plane, allowing access at some coarse grain level into these applications that you want to have some kind of controls around as well and visibility to that, right? Each of these applications can have sensitive data. They can have privileged access, and it could be a potential compliance exposure. So for the different applications, running the UARs in silos for each individual one with no visibility across your critical applications that are for your SOX audits or regulation audits might have different frequencies, different processes, different ownership, and there's no good one pane of glass for all of your critical applications that are regulated. And this is where it becomes really challenging, right? So let's talk about some solutions and the problem as well. So we talk about the siloed applications. We realize it's not just the applications that are siloed, it's the process of reviewing it, the access governance, it's fragmented too. Identities have multiple accounts across different applications. And some people might have multiple accounts inside one application, right? It's common to have a regular user account in an application, and maybe you have like a -A for administrative or privilege purposes. Very common in your directory world, maybe not so common in the ERP world. But it is possible for one identity to have multiple application accounts. And each of these applications or systems has its own security model. And maybe there's multiple levels of permissions. I mean, I know with SAP, it's your roles, your T codes, your authorization objects, your min-max values, Oracle EBS, responsibilities, menus, submenus, functions, very hierarchical in nature. So if you're not getting visibility to the lowest layer of that security model in these applications, it's very hard to understand the risk the users have access that are proposing to your organization, right? And it's even harder trying to do that across multiple applications. So if we keep going forward here, inefficient workflows, inconsistent workflows for the review process, it's a problem. It can create blind spots. You might be lucky to have automated user access reviews in one application, like it's built into that application, that could streamline that process. But older applications, it's typically a completely manual process. So IT admins, they have to extract the user and access data, dump it to a spreadsheet. This large volume of data that needs to be correlated to the right identities and mapped to appropriate reviewers, it takes days, if not weeks, to correlate that mass amounts of data, right? So when you do send it off to reviewers via an email, chase them down for reviewing it, approving the current access or revoking the current access, the reminders, there's missed deadlines, inconsistent follow-throughs. It's not the reviewer's primary job responsibility typically to do this review, so it's getting in the way of their quote-unquote business work, right? So if there's not enough visibility, if it's not easy, if the user experience for the reviewer is not good for them, and they don't have enough contextual data to make an informed decision, that's just going to lead to them not wanting to interrupt the business and just rubber stamp and say approve all, right? Which it does check the box on a process being followed, but it doesn't lead to increased security, right? So it's all about clearing their workload, not conducting a meaningful review. There are real world use cases where it takes 2 to 3 months to complete the review of a single application, let alone multiple instances of that application or multiple applications, right? Because many large enterprises don't have just one ERP instance. They might have multiple. If they're a national global company, they could have an SAP instance for multiple geographic regions, right? So by the time this is all done, the manual review process, that access snapshot that was being used may already be outdated, right? So if you're not doing it in a timely manner, you're looking at a snapshot in time. You take 2 months, 3 months, and there could be entitlement creep or inappropriate access has been added after that snapshot. So that's a real world problem. And if we get into, so much of this effort is used to complete these review campaigns, they are then run less frequently. This leaves your organization vulnerable to audit periods as you keep excessive and obsolete access with your users in those applications. The organization stays exposed to risk, especially across applications. So I'll just give you an example. One user has access to both Workday and SAP. The user has an HR admin access in Workday where they can hire and rehire employees, change salary levels, trigger payroll runs. And that same user has finance and payroll access in SAP. They can post payroll journal entries, release payments via the payment program. So the risk there is this one person can create a fake employee, initiate salaries in Workday, and then approve and execute the payment in SAP. So now you have fraudulent or erroneous payroll payments going to fake users. And that's your insider threat and revenue leaking out of the company, right? So if we continue forward into the last box here, when applications are siloed, you probably also creating compliance gaps, maybe provisioning outside compliant process. So for example, IT is going in, assigning access to these applications directly without any kind of oversight or compliant provisioning, no kind of process there. So you're in detection mode. You're not in prevention mode, you're in detection mode. You end up having a finance user somehow has admin level access to a non-finance system, and that kind of over permission, non-compliant access that's missed in siloed reviews. So auditors don't just want to see that reviews happened, they want proof that those reviews were meaningful and effective. And without context, usage, peer analytics, business risk context, without a centralized audit trail, fragmented data scattered across systems, it's really hard to show in a cohesive way the access people have and whether it's correct or not. And applications do fall through the cracks. Sometimes IT may even realize an application is being used because shadow IT, somebody pulled out a credit card, purchased an application that does have financial risk in it, and IT is not aware of that and bring that into the governance of the program, right? And if they are being reviewed, the reviewers are faced with long lists, tight deadlines, little context, and it's no wonder that reviewers are just rubber stamping and saying, keep all the access, don't take anything away, I don't want to impact the business, or the finger being pointed at me that I caused the business interruption, right? So if we stop here for a second, I think we have our first poll.
We do. Thank you, Jason. It is time for our first poll. It's been running for a little while now in the background. And what we'd like to know is what's the biggest challenge preventing thorough access reviews in your organization? So if you have not done so already, now is the time to input your response below the player and let us know what your biggest challenge is. So Jason, as we said, this has been running in the background for a little while now, and it looks like right now our front runner, 35% of respondents have said too many users or accounts to review manually. And then right up behind that, lack of context about what access is actually needed or time constraints and competing priorities. So what are your thoughts on these results so far? Is this what you'd expect to see?
Yeah, not surprising whatsoever. Hear it all the time, and hopefully, as we go through this webinar, we can talk about some of the ways to address those challenges.
Excellent.
Thank you, Kelly. All right, so this challenge of siloed user access reviews, can it be solved by just running them in parallel? Schedule the reviews across different systems to coincide, but if they're still happening in isolation, using different tools, processes, data formats, the same core problem is siloed governance within these applications, and of course, too many users to review. But the risk of access doesn't live in one system. It's not the 70s anymore. We're in a monolithic application stack where most of your business critical processes are happening in one application. It's spread across multiple applications. So that means expanding the user access verification programs and access governance to include more than just your ERP systems, and having a centralized enterprise approach. So one of the things is establish a single source of truth for identities and access, apply consistent access policies and review processes across the organization, and to get some savings, instead of the manual processes, automate these processes, which does save some operational cost, but then to the point of there's too many users. We'll get to how we tackle that problem a little bit. All right. So if we look at this roadmap to enterprise-wide access governance, how do we get there? It's where we are today. That means taking inventory of all your identity stores, your systems, applications across the landscape, identifying how access is currently managed and by whom, documenting pain points, manual provisioning, manual access reviews, inconsistent policies, lack of visibility, audit challenges. This will expose all the silos, the gaps, and will help prioritize which process needs to be tackled first. And as we go further along that journey, we want to define what enterprise access management and governance looks like for you, right? What's your source of truth? Often an HR system, payroll, benefits. It's wherever your HR function is onboarding new employees, and there might be systems for non-employees or contractors, vendors, external identities. There might even be non-human identities that you need to keep into account. Those could be service accounts, bots, agentic AI. Like all of this could have access that you need to bring in, understand what the authoritative source is, and then start correlating those identities to the accesses they have in the applications. What's your global access policies? What's your standards? Any localization to those policies required for different regions or departments? How will you handle joiner mover leaver processes as somebody in your organization moves from one role to another? Are they going to collect more and more access and never have their old access removed? And what roles and entitlements do we want to standardize across the organization? And on the next step of the journey, we're going to look at the defining our model, integrating with the applications, and onboarding the applications that have the most risk into that governance model, right? So integrate your core systems into one place, centralize their visibility, focus on the quick wins first, applications with a high impact or high risk. I mean, if only 5% of your population of users have access to an application that all it does is chat between people, I wouldn't bother with it. I'm going to bother with where my AP and AR and my business functions are occurring, not some kind of chat that only 5% of the company has access to. Now, if 100% of your user population has access to email or collaboration or other things, and that is data leakage possibility, then you might want to start with the biggest set of users that are using the application. Not everybody in your organization is going to have access to your financial application like SAP and Oracle, et cetera. But because it's so risky and critical to the business, you want to have the visibility to those applications, in my opinion, first. So then expand out in phases, ensuring that each system, as you bring it in, is applicable to the same governance process and the model that's aligned with your central policies. Right? And on the journey here, as you onboard more applications, then you want to start thinking about an enterprise or business role layer that spans across those multiple applications. So can you define a business role that gives access to things? So it's easy to then review the role instead of individual access. That can help centralize and enforce starting that enterprise-wide roles and permission policies. Move away from the ad hoc access assignments and the application role assignments and towards a standard business or enterprise role. There's some tricks to this, because if you go too crazy with enterprise roles, then you can have the problem of, well, I have 10,000 roles for 5,000 workers, which that doesn't make any sense, because I'm reviewing twice as many roles as I have workers in these applications. So think about your role, enterprise role model as well. I typically map it to org hierarchy. So employee, non-employee, great. 2 roles, great to have there. And then look at maybe it's a geo role, US, Europe, Australia. Maybe it's department level roles, marketing, IT, sales, whatever it may be. But if you keep building roles upon roles, enterprise roles, it can be unattainable to manage those roles, right? And the users that are a part of those roles, the applications that are part of those roles. So think about your role model as you're doing this cross-application role modeling. So create that standard role catalog, align it by job function is another way. And then you can look at reviewing the access of roles and the users assigned to those roles versus everything a user has. So that's a way to gain some efficiencies there as well. And last, there we go. Last is, unify that user access review. Don't have multiple UIs, multiple manual processes, multiple spreadsheets. If it's all in one place in a single glass, it is more likely for reviewers to review the access, and because they don't have to access multiple ways of doing it. So you're making it easier for reviewers to take the time to look at the access the users have. And it's not a set it and forget it process. Mature enterprise access governance, it's built on continuous improvements, continuous monitoring. And that's a whole other topic of continuous controls monitoring instead of manual controls testing that also Pathlock can help with. But that's the run phase of crawl, walk, run. But monitor your completion rates. Look at your orphaned accounts. Look at your segregation and duty violations that are unremediated, and expand the governance to cover new applications, evolving business models. M&A activity, brings more complexity to this. Regularly update your policies with your roles, your risks, and as regulations change as well. I think that brings us to the next poll.
It does. We have our next poll. This time, we would like to know, how often do access reviewers in your organization approve access without truly validating if it's still needed? So again, please select your response below the player. And Jason, we've got these results that have been coming in so far. It looks like 38% say sometimes, 24% say frequently, and then we're down to 17% rarely, 10% almost always. What are your thoughts on this? Is this what you would expect, rather?
Yeah, we see it quite frequently, and that's one of the things we try to help our customers with is instead of that rubber stamping and just going through that control, that process control to do the review, your CISOs are hoping that these access reviews lead to better security. and not just a compliance process. So it's always that cliche of compliance doesn't equal security, but you're hoping, and we'll show how Pathlock can help with that, hopefully increase your security posture and avoid the rubber stamping.
Great.
And I think, let's see here, we're just going to skip past that one real quick. Yeah, okay. So the evolving enterprise access reviews, let's start there. So we all start with periodic access reviews. Once the controls are moved from silo to centralized, the next step is to evolve how we review that access. Traditional blanket periodic reviews often overwhelm the reviewers. It dilutes, the focus. So we need to move to a smarter, risk-aware review process. If you want to move away from ad hoc access review campaigns to scheduled campaigns, whether it's quarterly, semi-annual, annual, it's tied to your audit cycle, but having a predictable cadence ensures that the reviewers are aware of when it's going to happen and they can allot time appropriately, right? So getting that habit of getting up every day at a certain time and going to work, or just get that cadence, make it a muscle memory for the reviewers, and you'll have better results than ad hoc springing it on them, right? And it creates that consistency, drives accountability, avoids the last minute scrambles that we often see right before the audits. And it does send a clear message that these access reviews, that's not a one-off task. It's a part of their everyday job responsibilities to review that access. The next maturity in access reviews, not all access is created equal. So that's why a key step in maturing your program here is to move towards risk-based prioritization. So we talked about making sure you're onboarding your risky applications first, but then within the applications, not all access is considered, critical risk or high risk. And there may be toxic combinations of access, segregation of duties that you want to concentrate on and remediate that access. Then combinations of access that don't lead to toxic combinations of access, right? So while the routine low risk access can be reviewed less frequently or with lighter touch, you probably want to concentrate on the higher critical risk that's identified. And you might want to do those reviews more frequently. So we've actually helped organizations reduce review all every quarter, and it's more of a review all annually, but then review the risky stuff monthly, quarterly, and that does reduce the amount of what the reviewers have to review, thus saving them time, which hopefully leads to less rubber stamping, right? And if they see that the reviewers, if they see that the review they're looking at is critical, high risk access, and not intermingled with low risk, they do take more time looking at it. So by incorporating that risk criteria, and when I say risk, it's multidimensional. It's peer analytics, looking at who within the peers have excessive access in their peers. It's a usage. Are they using the access they have? And then it's the segregation of duties violations that could lead to insider threat, right? So instead of just checking the boxes, we're aligning reviews to real world risk, improving the security posture, and making every reviewer's time count. As we go along that journey of maturity, one trick is to review that the business context. So it's predefined business roles. So think about your business functions. If you map certain access to business functions like payroll, cash to quote, you can do reviews based off business function and the risk involved with those business functions. So it's a different way to slice and dice how the access is being reviewed, mapped to business functions that maybe the reviewer understands that aspect more than looking at the name of some SAP role that they have no idea what that Z underscore, whatever means, right? So that sometimes will help a human readable business function with a reviewer in human readable language to help them pay attention to it and take the appropriate action. Another trick in the maturity here is the context. So just showing roles or entitlements or the application roles, not enough. We want to to be effective. So the context is, is the user actually using it? The usage stuff that I was talking about earlier. How does their access compare to the same role or department? Is the access tied to sensitive data? Because it doesn't have to be just segregation duties where there's two business functions that somebody has access to that could lead to insider threat, but it could just be sensitive access. And that could be Z_all in SAP. That could be the administrators group in Active Directory. There's a variety of quote unquote privileged or high risk access that doesn't necessarily have a segregation of duty risk to it, but it's just privileged or sensitive in nature. So by calling that out and the type of the business risk, that might help your reviewers make better decisions on whether somebody should keep or not keep the access they have. And continue on. I think there's one more. Event-based. So we talked about join, remove, relievers. There is a really big jump in where we see reviewers taking revocation actions when there's a micro certification for somebody who has moved from one job responsibility to another. And at that moment that HR trigger occurs, you can provide the new manager or old manager access to review the new employee or the old employee to say, oh, they don't need this access in their new job role. They had it in their old job role. Let's take that away. We do see, in addition to usage and business risk context, this micro event-based trigger is very effective at removing the access as employees and non-employees move throughout your organization. And I think one last one here. Yeah, okay. So, corrective actions. Strengthen your review process, include the corrective actions, identify, measure the corrective actions. You want to measure and have metrics on everything. So how long did your review take? How many revocations occurred in that? And use the quarter over quarter or review over review to look at, are you improving your revocation rates? That will give you some insights into your processes of providing access in the first place on the front end, right? So it closes the loop. It ensures that decisions are being made to actually review and will result in real world changes. It turns the access reviews from a passive exercise into an active control where access stays aligned with your policies. So that's the maturity model of enterprise reviews. And then the SMART strategies, we'll get into a couple of those before our next poll, I believe. Templatize your campaigns. Create reusable templates for your campaigns, whether it's by business unit, application type, risk profile. You can standardize the process and eliminate a lot of manual overhead. You predefine the scope. Is it users? Is it roles? Reviewers? Workflows? Saves times, reduces errors, ensures every review follows the same rules, the same structure, same level of scrutiny. The templates speed up the campaign creation process. In fact, we're looking at also how natural language AI can help campaign creators just use natural language prompts to create campaigns. So that's an evolution on Pathlock that we're looking at as well. But for now, use the save templates to re-kick off campaigns, right? Build that repeatable process, ensure consistency. The next trick is, did I go too fast? No, number 2, all right. Is include the relevant, we talked about this, the best practice is consolidate the access review campaigns, prioritize your regulated applications, support the same business function. You can group them by people who have similar review criteria. So an example would be finance and ERP access review, could include SAP, Oracle, and Workday, and that's it, right? And maybe it's just the high risk access within those 3 applications. So it's easy to manage, it's more actionable, it's aligned with how your business works. And yep. So automate, the effort to manually review this access is a time suck, right? So how do you transform automation? I think we covered that already. So automate a lot of these reviews, and that'll save time and human error, etc. Fourth is the insight and analytics. Very smart here to give your reviewers useful insights and analytics. Don't just have them, that flat list of role names or usernames. Give them insight. Is the user actually using the access they have? When did they last log in to that application? How does their access compare to peers in the same role or department? Assign risk levels to the roles or entitlements. Leverage that risk. Report on the access risk across the applications. When you layer in all this risk dimension, usage data, the peer analytics, reviewers can spot overprivileged users easier. It does lead to higher revocation rates. They see outdated access, they're risky, and much more easily. This approach transforms the access review process into true governance, leads to better security. And last on the list of tricks, I'm going to go ahead one more real quick. I think, okay. Have your complete defensible audit trail. It's always ready to share as evidence, right? You just produce that evidence after the reviews are done, hand it to your auditors. From the moment the campaign is created, the scope, the configuration, review assignments, everything should be tracked. We do track that. Every decision, approval, revocation, comment, it's all logged. Get it in one immutable document that you can hand off to your auditors. And use standard report templates. We have those, automated updates to stakeholders, and then reconcile the review decisions with actual access changes to confirm the right actions were taken. And I'll go back to the poll.
Thank you so much, Jason. All right, so this is our final poll, our third one, which has been running like the others for a little bit in the background. So we would like your input, listeners, on this question. Which approach would have the biggest impact on improving your access review quality? So if you haven't done so already, now's the time to share your response below the player. Let us know if you think risk-based reviews, better training, automated tools, evidence collection, or regular audits is the best approach. It looks like so far, Jason, risk-based reviews that focus on high-risk access first is in front with 38%, and then 28% behind that, automated tools that provide business context. So what are your thoughts on what's come in so far?
I'm happy to see risk-based reviews is number one. That's what we've seen is the number one thing that will help reduce the rubber stamping, lead to higher revocation rates, and better security in the organization. But automating, for those who are still doing manual reviews, automation is always a first good step as well. All right. So I can show you how Pathlock, looks like in action. Got some screenshots. I'll just kind of map those processes to how Pathlock's providing that, right? So here's an identity profile. It's where everything comes together. You're seeing a unified view of all the identities. It's extracting the data, from the applications, correlating it with the identity data from your HR system and the directories. We see all the number of applications that this identity can be employee, non-employee, contractor, a vendor. There's a lot of different types of non-employees, right, or external identities. It could even be service accounts, non-human identities. But you have this whole identity plane that correlates the access that identity has in multiple applications. And when you look at Carol Fraser profile, she's flagged, a high risk level. You see that, in the middle row there, right? So once you have that, you can also then, have this identity profile at a glance. You drill down here, you see some key identity information pulled directly from the HR system, like department, manager, location, company. This context helps reviewers and admins instantly understand who the user is and where they sit in the organization. And let's move into the users. Now, when I say users view, it's the user account in the application, right? So you can see all of Carol's application accounts, like SAP, Oracle, JDE, Salesforce. This is a centralized visibility of everything Carol has in one view. We also see the user account names in the different applications. Some applications have different user naming conventions than others. So you can see that information correlated back to Carol's identity. And we see something here that might be flagged, and it's probably one of the reasons she has a high risk level. Salesforce, where the employee name is not matching the account owner name, but also there's some high risk access in one of the applications. And if we keep on going down, looking at the roles view, we see a complete list of all the technical roles or application roles. And when I say an application role, it's typically the first level of entitlement hierarchy. And this is all those roles assigned to Carol through her user accounts across the various applications, whether it's SAP, Oracle, or other connected systems. You see the role type, the system, the user account, along with the role. And remember, each of these applications have different security models. So whether you are assigning roles, profiles in SAP, or responsibilities in Oracle, or user auth in JDE, the native language of the access and security model is represented as well. So Pathlock takes all the data, normalizes it into the role type, so admins and review have a consistent understanding of that access. It brings all that scattered access together in one place, so we're not logging into multiple tools or hunting through spreadsheets. And so here's the real business risk. This is all the segregation of duty violations that you'll see at the top there on violations. You get that view of the risk violations, and this you can both enter a journal and post it, right? So that's a high segregation of duty risk because it opens the door to potential fraud and misuse of access. But we're not just flagging the issue, we're providing a clear risk description, and that's content from Pathlock that explains why it matters, why reviewers and risk owners can understand the business impact and take the right action and put the right mitigating control, or remove the toxic combination from one side or the other, that two-sided risk, right? And have all these requests that are put in for this identity. This could be how somebody got access to what they have. Was it a birthright, a rule-based, automated access? Was it a request that was put in? Was it done inside the application directly that somebody did and you want to close that loop? When did it happen? Who approved it? Like all of this contextual data of how the person received this access, you want to know that information because hopefully the reviewers will take that into account as they make a decision to approve or reject that access. Right? And if we get into the targeted campaigns, we've taken a closer look at the identity profile. Let's look at the campaigns themselves. You can run repeatable reviews for entire departments, roles, systems, all while ensuring consistency and accountability. You can create user access review campaigns based on specific configurations that align with the organizational policies. You can filter the identities that could be included in this. It could be all employees, could be just contractors. It can be only users in a specific department or region. You can also narrow it down further by focusing on specific user accounts, like privileged accounts, or those with elevated access or even service accounts. You can focus on campaign based on roles. So if I want to review access only for users with critical roles, like admins, developers, finance managers, you can configure that here in the campaign creation as well. And let's see. So I can filter by systems as well. So we talked about, hey, if you have a big onboarding of these applications in your program, but you only want to run campaigns maybe monthly on your most critical application, you can do that here, right? So this level of granularity gives you a lot more control about what you're making your reviewers look at and take actions on. And here's a picture of building the frequency of this, quarterly, semi-annual, who gets assigned for reviews, how many review stages are needed. We have a very complete workflow engine in the back where whatever your business process is, if you want to have multiple reviewers, especially if there's a segregation duty that's present in this review, and you have an owner of that risk that's being violated, instead of just a manager looking at it, you could route this to the risk owner that is being violated, right? Because they typically will understand the risk context more so than maybe the manager would. So, and there's also escalation rules. If it's overdue, remind, poke, poke, poke. That's always can be nagging, but you want to even use auto close and revoke access if it hasn't been an action hasn't been taken. So we have had organizations that have had very hard security breach, and the shift of security goes the opposite way, and the policy changes to that if reviews of access hasn't been completed, that access is automatically removed. In fact, I came across an organization where their employees didn't annually do their security training, and access to email was automatically revoked. Now, is that going to stop the business? You make the debate, but it definitely is painful when you can't have chat or email. So somebody's going to act and get their security training done rather quickly. So those are some of the options you do have, depending on how heavy-handed you want to be on those policies, right? And so how do we enable the reviewers? This is what a reviewer would look at. That's one option. It is totally configurable. Right from the main grid, I can see the key details about the user's access, what systems they have, the roles assigned, and any descriptions, last login dates, and all those columns can be configured by the creator based on what the reviewer is going to need to make those decisions. And you get more on the identity under the review access they have, all the identity attributes, department, job title. That's pretty standard. And then we start getting into usage. So it's not just logging into an application, but are they using the T code? Let's say in SAP, are they using the function in Oracle EBS? We can get the activities out of ERPs because they expose that information. So it's just not a matter of can they do something, but are they using it, and have they done a transaction which could lead to internal fraud. So that usage information, very, very important for those who understand it to make a decision on whether somebody should keep the access or not. And then risk insights. Here we have a screen of the different sizes of the function, flagged for high risk access associated with any policy violations. You can also see what combination of those application roles are contributing to that risk. And it's all relatively human readable, our content out of the box, trying to explain what that risk means. Hopefully the reviewer takes that into account as they look at it, right? And then I think the last one we have is the historical data. When was it last reviewed? When's it going to be reviewed again? What decisions were made? Who made the decision last time? Then peer analytics. If you have 10 people in a department and the 10th person has a lot more access than the other 9 do, call that out. That's a context and insight for the reviewer to take into account as they make that approve or revoke consideration. So let's wrap it up. You transform how your users access government with PathLock. It's through centralizing processes, integrating your systems, automating the reviews. You get that unified management strategy because in the complex business landscape today, organizations need that unified view that spans multiple ERPs, whether it's ERP, SAP, Oracle, all those, or IT-based applications. And you move from a siloed to an integrated access review approach. You improve your risk posture, move toward zero risk. There's no such thing as zero risk, but if you have a defined risk threshold and you can monitor and measure getting to that risk threshold, we can help with that. And then you streamline your operations and getting advantages there as well. I think we're, yep. Business value, I'll skip past that. We're getting on time. And take your questions. Wrap it up.
All right, Jason, thank you for the presentation. There were some great insights there. It is time for audience questions. We'll fit as many of these in as possible in the time we have remaining. I want to remind listeners that if you have a question, please use the question tab in your console. We have had a few good ones come in already. Quick note for those requesting the slides, you can download the PDF version through the attachments. So let's go ahead and dive into our first question for you, Jason. And that is, does Pathlock have any customer metrics of access review improvements when including business risk and usage variables?
Yeah. So we commonly meet with our customers, do like some quarterly business reviews, and try to understand what value our customers are getting out of our software. And part of those meetings is trying to understand, as you do campaigns within Pathlock, what's giving you the biggest success, right? Because we want that feedback from our customers so we can help improve our own product, so it helps improve your organizational goals. So when we add the risk context, usage, I think I talked about event-based. As you layer these strategies on top of each other, the normal reconciliation rate manually is like 1%. When you automate, it jumps to like 3%. But when you start adding risk-based, the segregation duties, the sensitive access, we see things jump into 7% with that alone. Then you add in usage, and we've seen north of 10% revocation rates. You start adding in the event-based triggers, it skyrockets to like 30 plus on the first access reviews. As you repeat these, if your organization is relatively static, then of course revocation rates are going to go down. But if you have a highly a lot of onboarding and offboarding of users in the organization, then we see a consistent revocation rate because of the turnover in some verticals.
Okay, great. Following on, we have a question from Matt from Marletti Funding, who is asking, the landscape of roles and titles is always changing at our company. How do you suggest getting human capital on board with maintaining a consistent naming convention for roles?
So if I understand the question correctly, roles is like a position or a title. And yes, that's always tricky because if your logic on your identity lifecycle management solution is looking at titles or department names and those change, then you have to definitely work with your HR department. And I would recommend, don't trigger off anything that's a name. Typically, there's job codes that don't typically change, or department codes, right, that don't change. It's the human readable things that people love changing names. So if your access layer policies are leveraging HR data that isn't human readable and more code based, there's less correlation, less interaction, less collaboration with HR because that data is pretty static. But still, it is a huge best practice to build a bridge, maintain that bridge with your HR counterparts to understand the data in that system and what they're doing to it. Because if you're triggering off of it, obviously you have to maintain that logic in those systems.
Yeah. Moving on swiftly to the next question here. Besides business risk and usage data, what other data, processes, and or ideas that you can offer make access reviews easier?
And instead of concentrating on the data elements of this, I'm going to concentrate on the user experience. At the end of the day, I can throw so much data and insights and recommendations. If the user experience isn't one that the reviewer likes, human nature, it's hard to battle that. So that's where we are looking at other improvements in agentic AI and natural language, so that the interaction with the regular reviewers can be more collaborative instead of just throwing a bunch of data and overwhelming your reviewers. So those types of things we're looking at and can provide some of that data.
Daniel from Kaiser Permanente asks, Which do you think is the better approach to access reviews in terms of minimizing rubber stamping? Infrequent reviews containing a large amount of privileges or frequent reviews with smaller amounts of access to review? I see pros and cons to both approaches, he says.
If you don't have some of that signals like the usage, the risk, peer analytics, and you're just looking at smaller but more frequent or larger, less frequent, oof. It depends on the reviewer. Some reviewers get really angry that they're asked to do something every month because they just did it. But then other people look at a large laundry list, once a year, and it'll take them, an hour to get through it all. And of course, it might be year end, close end, or they're in a strategic project. So I'm sorry, there's no one right answer in that. It all depends on the reviewer. Art is in the eye of the beholder, and it's human nature.
You mentioned AI earlier, Jason, and it wouldn't be an IT GRC forum webinar if we didn't touch on AI. And here is a question concerning that. What's your thoughts on how AI can help improve user access reviews?
Yeah, it goes back to the user experience of the reviewer. One, we are taking a very security look at how we are going to leverage AI. Obviously, there's a lot of talk about if your data is in our system, what are we doing with AI and who are we leaking it to, or is it being leaked, right? Or what are we doing with it? And we take that very seriously. Your data is your data. We're regulated just like most people are. So what I see to be from an end user standpoint, it's that prompt engineering where a reviewer can say, hey, filter this list to the highest risk things. And there's already buttons in the system that you can filter and move columns around and save views to make it for that person what they want. But as people get comfortable with prompts and AI prompts, they can start interacting with a system to say, oh, anybody who has this combination of access, segregation of duty, hasn't been reviewed or approved before, all that, then revocate, remove. We see that as the next evolution in how we're looking at AI for the end user experience.
All right, great. I've got one eye on the clock here, so I'm going to ask a few more in sort of a rapid fire. But Glenn from Church Mutual Insurance Company says, should the access review be done by direct manager or should it be the system owner, which might not be the same person? If they work in a department that uses the application but is not the owner of the application.
Yep. So there are applications that you may only have 20 people in, but it's super critical, highly sensitive and risky to the organization. And the 20 people that have access to that application, there might be 2 managers. So do you want to have the 2 managers review, let's say, the 10 people each? Or do you not want to bug the manager and have the application owner review the 20 people? You can slice and dice it based on what kind of burden you're going to put on the reviewers.
All right. Maria from ProServe says, could email confirmation and changes be included as attachments within the product to demonstrate review completion?
Yes, it can. Some people will debate, the authenticity of emails because they can be easily spoofed. But yeah, we absolutely can deliver evidence via email and direct downloads that are immutable from PathBlock as well.
All right, perfect. We are coming to the end of the session, so I will leave the questions there for now. Thank you so much, Jason. It was wonderful to have you on, and I know our listeners appreciate the content that you shared with us today. And listeners, for those of you who qualify for CPE credit, your certificate will be issued within 7 days from our learning management system at itcpeacademy.org. So please watch out for the email notification on that and check your spam if you don't see that come through. Please join us next month for Coordinating TPRM Efforts, a multi-departmental approach. You can reserve your seat now through the console, but before you do that, please take a moment and leave a rating and feedback for today's session. Your input helps us improve future events. And that is it for today. I'd like to thank our sponsor, Pathlock, without whom this event would not be possible. And of course, thanks again to all of you for listening. We'll see you next time.
Thank you.